about design workflow and a little bit about analysis integration. All right, so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to say exactly the same things that Jim said when he started his talk on Monday. What does a warehouse do? How does it do it? And what are the resources you need in the warehouse in order for it to be able to do what it does? Those are the three fundamental questions. And when you teach warehouse design, one of the things I think you should do is you always check yourself and say, are my students now able to answer these questions? Do they know what a warehouse does? Do they know how it does it? And do they know what resources are needed for it to be able to do what it does? So now you've been to Joann's, you're experts on warehousing, you know exactly what a warehouse is and what it does. It's a big box, stuff comes in, stuff stays there, stuff goes out. We receive it, we store it, we ship it. So the warehousing context is that a warehouse receives goods from suppliers. Typically, a warehouse would receive goods in truckload quantities or near truckload quantities. You might have a truck that's mixed pallet quantities of particular goods, but these goods get received in a manner that the frequency with which you receive the goods is not high. It's maybe once a month, maybe once every 2 weeks, but maybe longer than once a month. The goods stay in the warehouse and then they go out to customers. So if you have a very popular item, it goes out to customers every day. It goes out with a high frequency, but in small quantities. So one of the things that the warehouse does is it provides coupling between this low frequency message, which is the receipt of the goods, and the high frequency message, which is the transmittal of these goods to the customers. So we send the goods out often, very often, in mixed packages. So a customer doesn't get just one SKU, they get a set of SKUs. So we're shipping something that's fundamentally different from what we're receiving. We're receiving a lot of stuff at one time of one thing, and we're shipping mixed things very frequently. There's a set of activities that have to take place in the warehouse for it to do that. We have to receive the goods and make sure we got what we ordered, that we're not accepting an order that's short without making a note of it. We're maybe detrashing things to put them away. We actually do put them away into storage. They stay there for a while. We retrieve them in some fashion. We assemble the customer order, and then we ship it to the customer. So there's this set of activities that take place in every warehouse that's not a cross dock. So I'm not going to talk about cross docks at all. So warehouse design is essentially specifying how each one of these activities is going to be done in this particular warehouse that satisfies the need to couple this set of suppliers and this set of customers, and what sort of resources are going to be needed to support those activities. Is there any way to get rid of this box over here?
There's an act on it.
Oh, how simple. All right, so it's really simple. In fact, I've often said that a warehouse is the simplest of all industrial facilities. I mean, if you can't design a warehouse, you can't design anything. And I used to say that because when I started the Keck Virtual Factory Lab, I chose two problems for us to work on. I chose warehousing because that's the simplest of all industrial systems, and semiconductor manufacturing because that seems like the most complex. It turns out, in fact, I had it exactly backwards. It is much easier to design a semiconductor wafer fab than it is to design a warehouse. And if it's not clear to you when we finish why that's true, ask me at the end. So people would think, well, no fabrication, there's no waste streams, there's no rework. How could this be hard? Well, it is hard. I mean, if you listened to Jim on Monday, did you come away thinking that warehouse design was easy? Did he make it seem easy? When you looked at all of the enormous wealth of content that Jim presented, and you think, whoa, how does he do that? It's not easy. Why is it not easy? It's not easy because there are so many degrees of freedom. There's just, how many different ways are there to store stuff? How many different technologies? Well, you can go and look, say, at the online resources that KickMe provides, and for any technology, you'll find dozens, maybe hundreds of examples. There's so many different ways to do things. If I'm going to assemble a customer order where I'm picking eaches and putting them into a carton for shipping, how many different ways are there to do that? An enormous number of ways to do that. How many decisions have to be made in a warehouse on any given day? Just an enormous number of decisions about how to batch orders, how to route the pickers, when to replenish, just an enormous number of decisions. So the problem with warehousing is one of combinatorial complexity. There's simply so many ways to do things, and we don't have a good way yet to sort out that complexity, to make it easier for us to see what is the fundamental problem. So we need to make it easier. So here's step number one in making it easier. Is first of all, a pretty straightforward observation, but one that has only really become obvious to me in the very recent past. Jim didn't really talk much about data, but the way the Progress Group likes to do warehouse design, and in fact the way that a lot of professionals who do warehouse design work, is they say, give me a year's worth of customer orders. I want a year's worth of customer orders because then I can analyze those orders and I'll know what it is that you need to do in this warehouse by looking at the customer orders. What that does is it makes you think that what is important is the details. I need a year's worth of, what would a year's worth of customer orders for Amazon look like? How many customer orders do you think Amazon ships in a year? 10 million? 20 million? Be a huge amount of data. How many different SKUs does Amazon store? It's easily hundreds of thousands. So you could very quickly become totally lost in that data. There's so much detail. But in fact, do you need all of that detail? I think the answer is no, you don't. Because what goes on in a warehouse is related to units of handling. When a manual picker visits a facing to take an item out of that, to put it into a container, the picker actually doesn't care at all about what the item is. The picker only cares about where it is and what the unit of handling is. So the picker reaches in and takes an each or two eaches, and they don't care if what they're picking up is penicillin or peanuts. They don't care. They're simply going to a pick face and taking an each. And the same thing is true if they're picking boxes or cartons off a pallet, or if they're retrieving pallets. They don't really care what the goods are. They care where they are and what the unit of handling is. So one of the things that we need to do is to focus not on the identity of what's flowing, but the nature of what's flowing. Because everything that's in each, if it's stored the same way and handled the same way, it may as well be the same thing. We don't care. That's a really important insight. And I don't know why it wasn't obvious to me a long time ago, but I've never really heard anybody talk about it that way. So I think it must be not a common insight. So what we're doing when we design a warehouse is we're specifying a capability to transform units of handling. That's what we're doing. And we're transforming them in the sense of where they are, their location. We're transforming them in the sense of how old they are, how long they've been in storage. We may be transforming them in terms of what format they're in. We take a carton off a pallet, and now instead of being part of a pallet unit load, it's a part of a carton unit load. So we're transforming units of handling. That's all we're doing. That's the fundamental capability that we're trying to specify. And it doesn't really matter what the SKU represents. What's most important is the unit of handling that it represents and some other attributes about it that are common to a lot of other SKUs. So we need to focus on those attributes that are important to us and not on the SKUs themselves. So what does that mean? All right, so I'm going to think about warehouse design as specifying what's in this white box. This white box receives an input stream. I'll call this the in stream, and it produces an out stream. The in stream, let's say, is goods on pallets, and the out stream is goods on pallets. But the in stream, I bring in a pallet and it's all one SKU. The out stream is a pallet that may be one SKU, but it may be a pallet that has a number of cartons on it, each representing a different SKU. I don't care how many different SKUs there are at this point. All I care about is I know the nature of what's being received and the nature of what's being shipped. I'm going to start looking at the out stream. And I'll come back and say why I'm going to look at the out stream in a minute. Now, what I know is that I have to specify a capability for producing that out stream. And what I know about the out stream is that it is full pallets or mixed pallets. It could be both. I could have a customer order that requires both